Hello.
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 Thank
Hi,
you,
everyone.
Rebecca.
Hi, everybody.
Can't see you, John.
Oh. I should be there now.
You are.
Great. So I see we are a quorum and everyone is here. So the meeting come to order. I hope it's not a lengthy one, but productive. First thing is we have to agree the agenda, which is basically a further discussion about the access across leading from Rawle Road over toward Dyer Pond. And then just to note the How Do You Like Them Apples meeting on Monday evening. Are we agreed that's a sufficient agenda?
Hi.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me start a bit with the public access issue then. And I'd like to go back to our charter because when we discussed this at our last meeting, I thought there was some lack of agreement about whether this actually fit within our charter. So the key phrasing about the charter is that our scope of work is maintaining, reestablishing, or improving the public rights of access to town landings, rights of way, or other means of public access within the town of Wellfleet. I read that as saying go ahead, but there were counter arguments.
I guess you can't, we can't talk about it, but you got that email from Ryan that kind of opened up our charter also.
Well, he's the one that wrote. He's the one that wrote
Right.
the charter. So,
Yep.
and he's
Right.
also head of the select board. Yes, Barbara.
Yeah, so I mean, we can talk about, we can talk about it. If we have it available and it's available, can be made available to the public, we can talk about, something that was outside of this. So is that something that you wanted discussed, the contents of that?
That email from,
Yeah,
no, I don't.
Okay,
no.
okay.
Okay.
I'm new here, but I read that charge in the charter as applying to beyond, as applying to Great Ponds, or applying to ponds as well as to shore, especially considering how important the ponds are to the town. And people's right to access and recreate at those ponds. So I would read it, our charge is including access to ponds.
My point last meeting, Barbara, was
Yeah.
that this is a little bit beyond just access to Dyer Pond.
Mm-hmm.
It's access across the property, which then connects to a path to Dyer Pond. And there are plenty other ways of accessing Dyer Pond. So the loss of this right of way does not impact the access to Dyer Pond except for a few individuals.
Are you saying individuals as opposed to the public at large?
I don't know how many of the public.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Steve, my counter to that is we had some evidence at the last meeting that a number of people use this access from Rawle Road. So I don't, having multiple accesses, I don't think, I think is fine.
Okay. Melissa. John, Melissa's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So I think our charge, in my eyes, I'd like to see us preserve access to all of the paths that we have in the town of Wellfleet, including those that don't necessarily lead to water. I spend a lot of time in the woods. I think all of us do. And I think it would be really sad to see some walking trails turn private, even if they don't go to water. And Barbara, I think what we talked about in the last meeting was that the only implication of this subdivision proposal is the potential to preclude access to the power lines, because there's plenty of ways to access the second half of the trail through the power lines.
Got it. Okay.
The pond.
Okay.
My question was just how public the usage was. I would love to see this path preserved, but I'm not quite sure what the evidence is that what the evidence is for public usage. And I would love to hear from a member of the public, or if I don't want us to get involved in a private lawsuit if
Right.
we have private usage, but if it's a publicly accessed path, then I absolutely would love to see us at least say something. If even if that,
Right.
I don't even know what that means either. What can we do? I'm not
Right.
quite clear on that.
Steve?
We were talking about the deeded right, and Melissa did some searching and couldn't find anything recorded. So I think it's still an open question whether that right to traverse that path is deeded or not.
Let me hold that, because I think that's a good point, and go back to the broader thing as whether this is within our charter. I think there can be both arguments. The way I look at it is if we act, make a recommendation, in other words, and it turns out that it's by other parties, it's judged that this is outside of our scope of work, I'm very good at saying, oops, sorry. But on the other hand, if we don't act and because of our failure to act, we lose this access, I think we'd all be rather upset. So I would rather barge ahead. That then brings the question that Steve was also was referring to, is to what is the strength of the argument that it is in fact a public access. And we had a map from one of the abutters on Rowell Street showing that there was or indicating that there was some sort of an easement, which Melissa tried to find and couldn't.
Not that that means anything either.
Well, but I appreciate your trying. That's good, you know.
Exactly.
Many gold stars for that. I think we're fortunate a little bit that we don't have the final say. The final say goes with the planning committee. We're perfectly used to working with this kind of issue of what has been recorded or hasn't been. And in any case, I think the legal advocate for the Rowell Road abutters will raise the argument. But the fact is we don't have firm evidence that this has been properly recorded.
John, what did you have in mind? I read your letter. I'm a little confused as to how things work with the planning board. What can they do for us?
I wanted to be sure they were aware of the issue, which I think the abutters will raise with them. And I wanted to ask that any decision include a stipulation that the pathway, however the development of the properties takes place, that the pathway remains open to citizens as it is now. They will, they're familiar with dealing with these sorts of questions, and they'll make a judgment. That's their business. As I say, I just would feel guilty if it was a legitimate issue and we hadn't raised it with them. But I'm not trying to replace their authority. I'm simply trying to raise the issue for them.
Yeah,
Say that we looked at it and we would like this, within our charter, we'd like this right of way to remain open, publicly open.
Barbara had her hand up. But
Yeah. Thanks. Yes. So, yeah, I think it's appropriate for one board to request of another board, in this case, a permitting board, that they include a stipulation like that, as a condition of a permit. So I'm comfortable with the idea of doing that, but I agree we should, if we can, have a pretty good idea of whether the pathway actually, whether the easement exists or not. So I guess based on the discussion here, we're not entirely sure that it exists, or we can't prove that it exists from a recorded instrument.
I just did a simple Barnstable County registry.
Okay.
search. I don't have
Yeah.
the experience
Yes.
to do it, but my other question was about public usage.
Right. But I agree, I'd rather take an opportunity and say later that we were mistaken than miss an opportunity. So I agree with that idea.
I had written a draft letter to the planning board, which I think I hope I included that with the agenda.
You did.
And the second, the sentence which ends the third paragraph says, it is also protected, this is from my draft, it is also protected by an easement on file for Barnstable County. I might change that to say, we also believe it may be protected by an easement. In other words, waffle. And
Yeah.
the other change I thought from what I had first written is on the last sentence, which reads, now we therefore request of the planning board that any decision about the proposed development include a stipulation that the pathway remain available to citizens and local residents. And I propose to put between remain and available the word permanently.
Right. Right.
And if they, if they throw it back in our face, so be it. I mean, it's their business.
Does citizens and local residents, does that include, the citizens include the public at large? I guess I'm just trying to figure out the category.
Must be a lawyer.
There are lots of people who come here in the summer and use that path who aren't citizens or local residents. So perhaps we need to change that language.
Yeah, I was just, if we're saying, the public has used, this historically, then the rights remain available
To the public.
Period, rather than drawing distinctions between residents,
Yeah, absolutely.
citizens. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
And I'm sorry to be doing all the talking. I promise to be quiet later. But so
No.
I just had a question about Great Pond. You know, there's two different definitions. There's the Chapter 91 definition, which is 10 acres, and then there's the statutory definition in Chapter 131, Section 1. It defines it as 20 acres. So I was just thinking I could do a little more research and clarify that, because the DEP, it's the statutory definition that says it's owned by, you know, title held by the Commonwealth for the benefit of the public. But I'm not sure the DEP, you know, the Chapter 91 definition of 10 acres has all the same, that the public has all the same rights as it does for a great pond that's 20 acres or more. So has this ever come up before?
No, I wasn't aware of that distinction.
Okay. Do we have a time for me to do a little research on that and just make sure? Or were we planning to send this? I guess we were planning to send this before Monday.
Let's see,
Yeah.
their meeting is
18th.
18th.
Yeah.
So, and
Okay.
Monday is the 16th, but their meeting is in the evening. So if we got something to them
Yeah.
in the morning, it would meet the 48-hour
Right.
stipulation.
Well, can I screen share the definition, or do we want to move on to?
No, let's, this is, it's an
Okay.
interesting point.
Well,
Okay.
an interesting part of this though is Dyer Pond 10 acres or 20 acres?
It's 12.
Okay, so
That's in between.
yep,
Okay.
okay.
So this is Chapter 131, Section 1, which is the definitions. So here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but Great Pond, 20 acres or more. So
And and where does this appear in the state?
so
This,
it's in Chapter 131, which is inland waterways or something like that. And then it's, you know, it's Section 45 of this that has, hang on one sec, that has the rights of the public to access, you know, Great Ponds. So here, you know, this is the section that says public has a right of access, you know, for fishing, for hunting, boating, fishing to all Great Ponds. And so this section would be using the definition in Section 1, which is 20 acres. But it's the DEP program, the Chapter 91, that uses the 10-acre definition. On the other hand, maybe there's nothing wrong with just saying it is, and there's a public right of access. And if we need to revisit it at some time, we could. See, this is the problem with having a lawyer, with accepting a lawyer onto this committee.
you got good questions.
So,
Good questions.
so,
And yet it's clear, maybe all we have to say is, I mean, this is clearly a public pond.
yes,
And it, excepting about 3 or 4 houses on the shoreline, it's owned by the park. The park owns the shoreline.
right.
So why don't we just say that this is a publicly owned park,
Sure.
and punt the Great Pond issue.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I think there's plenty to assert about the public having rights to it without saying it's a great pond.
Okay. I will, Barbara, come back to you about this point at
Yep.
some time because I'm also on the Natural Resource Advisory Board, and we're beginning to think about a management plan for the ponds in the town of Wellfleet. And up to this point, I thought we were dealing with a 10-acre issue.
Right.
And it looks like we have to be more careful about that. So I will need some future advice.
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
It's
Yeah,
a
I'd be
good
glad
point.
to. Yeah, so here, this is in the state's chapter 91 information. That's where this 10-acre definition comes in. So I don't know why there are two different definitions, but there are. So
I will just leave out anything about 10 acres and just say it's a publicly owned pond.
it's fine. Yeah. Okay. All right, let me stop screen sharing if I can remember how.
Clear, John?
Yes, go ahead, Melissa.
I think I'm in agreement that we've heard that there's public use here. I don't know if we've heard evidence of it, but I would want to be proactive rather than, like you said, let something happen that we don't want to happen. Can we take a vote before, just so we're sure we're all in agreement? Because I think it's unclear.
Help.
Well, what I was going to propose is as a vote, as we agree to send this letter to the Planning Commission with the several modifications that we have discussed. The first modification is we drop the 10-acre argument and just say it's a publicly owned. The second thing is rather than saying boldly, it is also protected, we say it may be protected by an easement. And the last one is that it's the pathway remain permanently available to the public.
If we're gonna vote on the letter, can we change the first sentence? That the
Sure,
church
if
is
it's wished.
We're saying that the charge is to preserve and expand the rights of citizen access.
I bet you're going to say public access.
Okay, public access. Maybe not so specific about leading to the water. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? That we're
Okay, I see what you're getting at.
yeah.
How about the charge of RPAC is to preserve and expand the rights of public access to I had a nice word to go before facilities.
Natural resource.
I like that.
We can reiterate it, how it's written.
Natural resources such as
Ponds, bays.
yeah.
Our charge says rights of way, maintain and improve public access to town landings, rights of way.
In this case, it's just rights of citizens to access a path that has been used by the public for years.
Yeah, but the first sentence is sort of a broad view.
Yeah, okay. So
Why don't we just say the rights of public access to resources such as beaches, shellfishing, and pond?
That's all water.
Yeah, this is not the whole charge. So,
In my mind, this isn't about access to the pond.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like, Melissa, you suggested natural resources, right?
Sonia,
Oh, Sonia, sorry.
I say expand the rights of public access to natural resources, including beaches, shellfishing, and ponds. But that doesn't mean that it's that's the whole story.
How about you
It
want
is,
to add,
it's interesting because this almost always there's water at the end. And but that may limit the, at some point that may,
right? How about trails? Just add trails. That's kind of a general word. So including or such as beaches, shellfishing, ponds, and trails.
all right.
Should it be walking trails or just trails?
I'm
Okay.
fine with either.
I would keep it as broad as possible.
Okay, John, are you writing down what this first sentence is going to look like?
Yes, and
Can you read it to us now?
the charge of RPAC is to preserve and expand the rights of public access to natural resources such as beaches, shellfishing, ponds, and trails.
I move that that first sentence be changed to just what John said.
Can we have one vote and approve the whole shebang? Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yes,
That's the first sentence. And
Well, but let's just hammer out one part at a time, unless you've got some.
no, I just trying to, if you want to have a series of votes, that's fine. I was thinking that maybe the easiest thing to do would be to have one vote after we read through it several times. We can go
Okay.
any way you want.
I'll withdraw my motion then.
So let me read through what I think it says. The charge of RPAC is to preserve and expand the rights of public access to natural resources such as beaches, shellfishing, ponds, and trails. A development is planned for parcel 1685 at the east end of Rowell Road. This development may affect the public use of a pathway that crosses this land. This path leads to Dyer Pond. This is a publicly owned, this pond is publicly owned, period. Including a swimming beach, which is operated by CCNS. We have heard evidence that this path has been and is much used by citizens of the town, by the public, not citizens, by the public. It may also be protected by an easement on file for Barnstable County. We therefore request of the planning board that any decision about the proposed development include a stipulation that the pathway remain permanently available to the public. And I'll catch my breath by just making a motion that the committee approve this a letter as written.
As modified.
I'll send it around. And if anyone says this isn't exactly what we said, we'll waffle it a bit, but I think it's pretty good.
I'll second it. There was a motion, right? I'll second.
Just one other thing, I was gonna copy this to the select board, as proposed that we copied it at select board. So I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor? Barbara,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Melissa,
I,
Sonia?
Aye.
Okay. I'll send around a copy. If it isn't what you thought you voted on, holler.
thank you, John.
The second part of the agenda, I got out in front of myself. There was a meeting on Monday evening about the How Do You Like Them Apples area off of Indian Neck, shellfish facilities, plots. And I had thought to myself when I saw this, well, perhaps this could also be part of a interesting citizen pathway that would circumvent the south end of Indian Neck. So I went out yesterday morning at low tide and took a walk and came to the conclusion that that was a really bad idea. Because as you set out from Fox Island at the bottom of it and begin to walk around, first of all, it's clear that the whole area where you might walk is tidal, and some of it down in the south end is pretty mucky.
Mhm.
So I don't see any particular access issue. I know that there's a lot of discussion between the town and the people who live on Indian Neck about Omaha Beach Road, and that's ongoing. I don't think that we support that, but I don't think there's any more specific involvement that we can take at this point. I did have, just totally parenthetically, one other, oh, sorry, Melissa, you had your hand up. I didn't see that.
You can go ahead. Maybe I'll go after. Or
No, I'm going to go off in an entirely different tangent.
okay. One thought I had about our involvement here was at an SAB meeting, there was discussion of the need for us to come together as a community and figure out mediating the usage of town property between all of the users, kayakers, shell fishermen, all of that. And I was asking myself who would represent the recreational small craft people. And I was thinking maybe the discussion is going to be about the usage of the Hilda parcel and what to do with the land that's not being currently used for aquaculture. And there was a point raised at the SAB meeting that perhaps we need to preserve pathways for small crafts to pass. I don't know if that's necessary, but I thought that maybe that would be something that we could discuss.
I'm not quite sure what's going to happen on Monday evening. What I read was this is basically an opportunity to put ideas out, and I think what you have is a perfectly good one, and you ought to contribute it. I just don't know enough about the situation there. I'm seeing this as a learning opportunity.
John, Helen's got her hand up.
Who did?
Helen has her hand.
Helen,
Hi there.
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, a couple things. Thank you for recognizing me. Normally, when a community buys a big piece of land like this, and this happened in Truro with a Walsh property and I only learned today that I think it's also happening in Eastham with another, multi-acre parcel that Eastham bought. What's normal is you have a planning stage once the town has secured the property. So that happened with the Hidilter Trust in, I think, late fall of 2019, and then came the pandemic. So organizing the normal kind of community planning, deliberative look at a huge purchase made by the town and how it should be used. In some cases, it may be obvious. In some cases, it may not be. But to have everybody's interests that need to be considered, all the stakeholders' interests, put on the table and looked at before you do any further development or change of the property is a normal thing to happen. And it didn't happen before 3 people had applied to get extensions. Now, that may be fine, but in the meantime, that area is a place in this harbor where many, many people with commercial permits fish. And as we all know, once there's an area that's leased for aquaculture, you can't go picking in the wild there. So there's that issue, and access to the area, the habitat, where people can, whether it's recreational, and Nancy, you catch me up here if I'm getting anything wrong, please. Whether it's recreational or commercial for picking in the wild, access to that area in this intertidal property, not to mention access to the beach, access to, for boats, recreational or otherwise, that all needs to be discussed and looked at. And there's some spin-off issues like, should it be resurveyed? Should it not? Whatever. None of this has been discussed. And a little bit late, but still in time, that's what's going to happen, I hope, on the 16th. Now, the other thing you need to know in case you want to go and look at these meetings, and the June 4th meeting was the most, I think, substantially productive for me. But the Shellfish Committee discussed this at least 3 times. The chair and I were trying to remember if it was 4 times yesterday. We were talking about something else. Nancy may have a better number. At least 3 times this was discussed. And the Shellfish Regulatory Board, in other words, the select board, has never had a meeting about it. And now we're finally going to have a meeting. And it's only going to be about that. There are not going to be any more agenda items as far as I know. So if you have more questions, either Nancy or I can probably answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Nancy, are you have any comments? You still with us?
Yes, hold on. I am. I have to run right now. I have a 2:30 meeting. Sorry. I think it's great. And I think both the harbor master, the harbor master and I, once a grant extension had been requested for that area, we sent a memo to the select board saying that we should have a community conversation about how this area gets used and expanded. How it gets used. And I think the topic or the issue that Melissa brings up about, access for kayakers and stuff, I think it becomes a moot point because kayakers typically access at higher tides. So they could access anywhere along the beachfront as opposed to low tide where they'd have to be negotiating around grants. But I guess I'd prefer to just quickly answer any questions before I have to go to this other meeting. Is that helpful?
Yes. Are there any specific questions for Nancy? I just,
I think that the fact that multiple committees and the select board are going to deliberate and have community discussions on the highest and best use of this property is the right way to go.
let me just, give me 30 seconds before you leave, Nancy. I was going to make a comment, and it, because after I took this walk yesterday, which was very interesting, and I looked out at where the shell fishermen were, and I realized that it was the slope of the harbor was very flat, shallow. And then I put on my NRAB hat and we talk about sea level rise. And one of the things I would be concerned about, if you've got a flat harbor bottom, it doesn't take much sea level rise to really increase the amount of coverage by seawater with sea level rise. And the sea level rise is, according to all the NOAA predictions, going to take off in about 10 years. So I just thought that if we're doing long-term planning, we ought to think about that. I would not want to own one of the plots which is furthest out. That might be a long-term risk. So
What do you mean when you say own one of the plots that's furthest
you know,
out? Do you mean,
be assigned one of the plots or asked to be for shell fishing purposes.
a lot of them have kind of upland area, at least around the Field Point area. There's quite a bit that have upland areas that are not usable right now because they're out of the water for a long time.
Well, that's fine.
But
I
along
would
where there
think
are revetments, it's a different story. Most of that section of Indian Neck is armored, is an armored shoreline.
I'm
So
just suggesting you do a study and see what sea level rise is going to do. That's
And Helen has her hand
yeah,
up.
I see Helen Sand. So
Okay.
Helen, please.
Yeah, to add to what was just said, this factor was very carefully considered before the purchase. In other words, it was one of the facts, one of the sets of questions came up. A lot of questions, at least Nancy and I talked about this and other people brought it up in the Q&A sessions all over town. You can fish in deep water grants, it's harder. I mean, you can farm in deep water grants. In other words, grants that really don't have much exposure, even at dead low tide. It's more difficult. People struggle with it, but it can happen. The other thing is people with commercial permits can fish in the wild from boats. The area will still be fishable. It will change. And the tidal opportunities will be shorter if sea level rise happens, both seasonally and daily. But when the tide is out, there will still be a strip of beach, and that's one of the public uses. And all this was thought about. Yes, it will change, but the whole shell fishing industry is also going to change because of acidification. So yeah, we need our sea legs, but the property will still be fishable somehow. Thank you.
I'm glad that was built into the initial conversations. That's reassuring. Great. Are there any other? Nancy, your hand is up again, please.
Yeah, I just was going to add that there was an incredible climate change working group that was set up by the town that had at least 4 shell fishermen on it that I can remember. And they came out with kind of a plan of what the town should be looking to address. And it included access, of course, and sea level rise, but things that we should be looking at accommodating. So we do kind of have a roadmap for that to incorporate into our kind of forward-looking plans. As you say, John, it is very important and it is going to happen in our lifetimes. So
That's good. I mean, I'm encouraged. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other matters to come before the committee today? I have one other thought. Go ahead, Melissa.
I just think that we should be involved in the discussion, whether or not we're just there to listen or not. I think what we learned at our joint meeting with SAB was that there's a lot of issues between user groups. And I think that this discussion could just be a good beginning to us even beginning to start thinking about some of the problems that we have at other town landings that we talked about as well. I think it was Pleasant Point. And I don't know if that's something that we want to tackle. We can talk about it, but at least just being aware of what's going on, I think we should be there.
Helen?
You're muted. You're muted, Helen.
Sorry about that. I hope that all of you show up, but remember, if you do, post it. Okay? You can post yourselves as having a meeting, and if none of you show up, that's fine. If a quorum doesn't show up. But if even 3 of you show up at that meeting, for whatever reason, you should definitely have it posted for yourselves too. And today's Wednesday, so you'd want to do it today just to be safe, or early tomorrow morning. You know, the SAB has to do that too. It's the select board's meeting, but if you want to show up and express opinions, you know, and even have an exchange between yourselves during the meeting, you know, just be safe, post it.
Bye, everybody. Sorry, gotta run. I'm available. If you ever need anything, just email me or call. Thanks.
Right. Bye, Nancy. Helen, thank you for the advice.
Yeah, just to be safe.
Okay. Before we wrap this up today, I need to know who is going to accept the role of being chair of
I'll take it.
next meeting. Steve.
Okay.
I think we want to get back to our basic agenda. Look at the 2 issues on Lieutenant Island that are particularly of important, Way 100 and the northwest corner. Go back to the meeting we had with the Shellfish Advisory Board and see if we have some priorities of action there. I think anyone else who has a suggestion for a discussion at our next meeting, please let Steve know.
I've done a little looking at the sand pullout and would have something to say at the next meeting if we put that on the list, on the agenda.
Okay, that's fine. We'll need to round up a date. I'm going to be in Maine the last week in August and the first in September, but if that's a convenient time and you've got the other folk attending, that's fine with me.
Are we, I know initially we were having meetings once a month. Or, you know, recently we've had meetings every 2 weeks. Are we trying to go back to that pattern? You know, putting
I
that.
think I personally kind of like the once a month. This meeting, I needed this meeting. We needed this meeting so we could prepare the letter to the
Letter, right? Which is why we've had extra meetings. We had the joint meeting and that sort of thing. But just like moving forward,
yeah, once a month.
going back.
Good meeting once a month sounds fine to me. But if something important comes up, we got to deal with it.
Right.
Let's do that.
Yeah. So then, where are we now? So then we're looking September, probably second week of September. Is that about right? What are we, 12, 11?
Yeah, something like that.
What about the 2 items that I talked about before? Do we want to have a discussion about taking custody of parcels? Do we want to have a discussion about whether or not we should get involved in mediating user groups?
My own vote would, we should definitely have a discussion about taking custody of parcels,
There's a timeline for that. I think
you know,
we're coming up on it.
yeah.
The timeline is for what? For our annual meeting or something?
I'm not entirely sure of exactly when, but sometime in the fall is when we have to submit a proposal. I
Okay.
think it's early fall.
I'd be curious to learn what that entails. Like, what does that mean for the committee if we take on parcels? I feel like I'm not really clear on.
That's why I think we should discuss it.
Yeah.
Just the possibility. Do we want
Right.
Melissa, the second topic was mediation, among users, or what was the second topic you suggested?
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway from the joint meeting with SAB is that we have issues with access points not clearly communicating what is allowed. And I had sent to everyone an article about how the town of Dennis had done it and
Mhm.
suggested that maybe we could do that. So I don't know if we want to discuss whether or not we want to do it at the next meeting.
Yes, I thought the Dennis materials were great. I think I would support discussing that at a future meeting. If it's too much to have at the same, just have that discussion at the same meeting as the other topic that we're adding, then maybe not this next meeting, but certainly soon. I would agree with that.
I guess we should probably figure out whether that's, we mentioned for the next agenda possibly revisiting Lieutenant Island. Maybe we should be focusing on this first. You know what I mean? Like I got a contact from Thomas this week from SAB asking if I want to have a chat, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be about usage of landings. And the discussion on the Hidelta property is going to bring up a lot of those issues as well. I don't know if anyone else read in the Provincetown Independent, there is an article regarding that public hearing.
Yep.
And it was just interesting to kind of look into it and understand some of the interest groups. You know what I mean? Like I'm more familiar with the shell fishing side of it, but boaters, recreational kayakers, beachgoers, things like that. It'll be interesting to start to understand what other groups' concerns are. And that, this may be kind of like opening up a new chapter for this committee in terms of like what, where we stand and how we manage these issues or help manage them. And I do think that the Dennis information on landings and how to use them, I think, ultimately Wellfleet should have some kind of system like that to help people. I know Nancy I think she put together a document with Jordan regarding boats and how to safely boat around shellfish grants. Something like that was really useful. And I think we can probably have, information available to the public on how to use landings and what's allowed. And, I kind of have a feeling that like that's where we might be headed. So I don't know if that's a higher priority at this point. Any thoughts?
Ellen has her hand up again. You're
Muted.
muted.
Trying so careful to hide in the corner and not doing a very good job. Two things. What isn't mentioned except by me, like a stuck record, is the state mandates that use of the harbor be considered for all the users. So recreational boaters have a lot of standing. Now, personally, I think people trying to support themselves is more important than people, having a nice time out on Jeremy Point for the day, although I've done that and liked it. But the state says you have to consider the other uses. It's not just like, oh, maybe we should. That's the first thing. The other thing is, while you all were I looked up and just sent to all of you the DEP's list of great ponds. And Dyer is not included, although it is 10 acres, as Attorney Carboni said very accurately. So I wonder, about that, if they don't classify it as a great pond, even though technically, according to them, it still is what applies. Maybe the list is just not that good. Thank you.
Ellen, do you remember, was Duck Pond on the list?
Yes, it is. You'll all get it when you want to check that email.
Okay.
I sent it to all,
I always thought that Duck Pond was just 10 acres, so I don't know why. Maybe my memory about the size of Dyer Pond is wrong.
The other thing is my memory, and is it in Mass General Law? I hadn't read that section and couldn't read it all when it was up on the screen just now for quite a while. If it is a great pond, classified by who? Probably the Mass General Law, not the DEP. There has to be one public access point, i.e. where you can get into the water, because you guys have two issues. How do you get to a place? And then if there's water involved, how do you get into the water? That's a different thing, for whatever use, in my opinion. Access to it doesn't necessarily imply that you can then get into it. I may be wrong about that. Thank you.
At the moment at Dyer Pond, the seashore maintains a little swimming beach area, very nicely done.
But do
I
they
saw
own
no signs of any boating activity.
Do they own it, or is it simply in the park? Does the town own it? A quick look at the assessor's map will tell you.
That's a fair question. I assumed that the state owned it, but now that's been called into question. So,
So I volunteer. I'll look at that.
okay. So I think, Steve, there's a long list of
It is.
possible agenda items. I think maybe why don't you suggest to us a priority, and we'll try to agree where
Okay, and when you
what we talk about and what we don't. I think the way to do that is send out a draft agenda item, and then each of us reply independently to you without copying the others, and you're in charge of the meeting. You just make a final decision and we'll go ahead.
Okay.
Anything else for this meeting?
When you coming back, John?
I think it's the weekend after well, 10 days after Labor Day, something like that.
Okay. We'll try and find a date someplace out there.
Float a couple by me and I'll see how it works. And I mean, we can get four of you is actually any three of us is
Quorum.
enough. Motion to adjourn the meeting?
One thing,
Yes, please, Melissa.
I'd just like to request that the meeting not be during the week of the big tides. I can't check it right now, but I can email you later, Steve. And then also, can we just figure out how many people are coming to the Hilda meeting? I'm going.
I'm going to try to go. Should we post?
Is it possible for us to attend and say that we're not? I'm attending as a shellfisherman. So
Okay.
maybe
I see.
I mean, it's never wrong to post, it's never a mistake to do that. It's sort of a good practice, but as long as no one is talking to each other, there isn't, an open meeting law violation just because there happens to be a quorum there. But, posting is always a safer option.
And we'd just be posting that RPAC is attending that hearing?
Well, technically, the reason why you're posting is because if three of you are together, it's a meeting of sorts. So I think if the language is something about, plan that attendance of a quorum at the select board meeting, for its discussion of the Hidelta acquisition, something like that.
Okay.
Maybe there's a model somewhere that other committees have used before. I don't know if Helen's still here, but
Yes. Model for what?
just whatever the language in town, what's the common way of posting if you anticipate that a quorum of members will be attending another board meeting, just if there's a way it's done in town, that's just what I would.
Straight up open meeting law, just post.
Okay.
And then if it turns out that anybody wants to express opinions, and by the way, Melissa, Sonia, you both fish in the wild, right?
Yeah, I own I leased a grant out there too.
No, but you have a commercial permit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have so what I'm hoping is there are going to be a lot of people who have commercial permits that show up and voice their needs. So it's not just me, Helen, not a commercial permit holder yapping about it. But just post, it's simple, there's no model.
Okay.
And if you don't have a quorum that shows up, see, this way, you guys can all just leave it up to how you feel that day. And you're safe. But if a quorum doesn't show up, then, you can't, it doesn't matter. You don't have to cancel that. So to answer Barbara's question, there's no model. Okay. And it's so easy to post. Which one of you posts?
I can do it.
Yeah, I mean, just, do it with Jennifer. It takes 2 minutes.
And then we just have to do it by tomorrow morning, right? I'm not able to.
Or
Get it
today
out
before
this
for work, it's, how long does it take?
I know. I actually have to leave the meeting. I'm quite busy. this afternoon.
One of the other of you do it.
Yeah, I mean, if someone can put it up there,
Yeah.
I'm tied up until nighttime, pretty much right after this closes.
I can try and do it if you can tell me who it is you contacted at town clerk's office.
Rebecca Eldridge.
Jennifer Congle, and copy Rebecca. Jennifer Congle is our town clerk.
Okay,
You can go through Rebecca, but Jennifer Congle is the one who ends up doing it.
okay. And her email will show up on the website someplace?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll post a meeting notice for us to be present at the Monday, August 16th, 7 p.m. How do you like them apples discussion?
Select board meeting. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. By the way, there are 2 different items on the calendar for August 16th. Both, I think, for the same thing. Well, maybe that's one of those as an example. Some other committee saying they're going to be part of that. I'll check that out too.
Thank you.
I'll get you something up there.
Are we set to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn, second. All in
Second.
favor?
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
Thank
we'll
you.
look forward to our next meeting, Steve.
Okay,
Take care now. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
bye-bye. Stay cool.
Mhm.